Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Hamali and I talk about all the things that nobody wants to talk about while I do my makeup. So a little while ago, I made a video on Instagram talking about how I'm indecisive about having kids. I'm just not sure if I want them. Someone under there commented, "Can you imagine if your parents had this thought and pursued it through? You wouldn't be here talking. Everyone struggles in life. No one in this world has it easy, the ones that show they do or the ones that don't. But you are also your own responsibility, so do what suits you, but don't put it out there like it should be a thing. People go through a lot to have kids and even a lot more to raise them. And then there are many who can't even have them." I'm not really sure what that part means. I think what she was trying to say is like, don't make it seem like parenting is so hard and that it's impossible kind of for people to do, and just kind of painting parenting or having kids with this negative light. She continues to say, "What you think about you is great, but don't put it out there being insensitive to others' feelings." So I really wanted to address this comment, especially the first part about it, where she's like, you know, could you imagine if your parents had these thoughts and potentially didn't want to have kids, like you wouldn't be here. I get that comment quite often when I talk about potentially not wanting to have kids. And to that, I'm always just so confused, because it's like, okay, if they decided not to have me, I wouldn't even know. Like, I can't even have feelings towards that, because who cares? Like, I wouldn't know what this existence would even be like, so I can't have feelings towards it. Also, they act like I'm having the best time on earth. Like, earth is ghetto, okay? It's not like I'm having the greatest time here. I don't hate my life. Like, I still love my life, but at the end of the day, if I wasn't born, I don't feel like I would be missing out on anything. You know what I mean? Because, like, first of all, I wouldn't even know, like I said before, and I went through a lot of struggles in my life. Like, I feel like I wouldn't have had to deal with any of that. And I'm saying this as a person who's pretty blessed to be in the position I'm in and living the life I have. But on a more serious note, I wish my parents did have these thoughts. I feel like they sacrificed a lot when they really didn't have to. And if they did want to have kids, I wish they did it at a time they were more mentally and financially stable and ready to. I wish they were allowed to explore their hobbies and chase after their dreams. I wish they were able to figure out who they were and what they wanted before, you know, bringing children into the world and making that their whole identity. I feel like my parents sacrificed their youth and their mental health for me and my sisters. And if I had the choice to reverse that and allow my parents to live out a life where they were able to put themselves first and have kids when they felt like it suited them, then I would, even if that meant I wouldn't be here. I honestly wonder what kind of parents they would have been if they had the privilege of being able to make that decision for themselves and not be forced into having kids. Like I said, I don't think it's that my parents didn't want to have kids. I think they were just forced into having kids at a time where they weren't actually prepared to, because that's what the tradition was. It's like, get married, have a kid. As a millennial and someone that's 31, I understand the pressure of society expecting you to have kids, and I can't imagine how much more intense that pressure was for someone in my parents' generation. Like, it was probably worse. So I really don't feel like they even had the freedom to think through whether or not they wanted to have kids. And if they did want to have kids, they didn't really have a choice of when they wanted to or when they felt like they were prepared to. And that really does make me sad for them. Like, my mom had her first kid at 25, and honestly, 25 for their generation probably seems kind of old, because I know there were a lot of women that were having children in their early 20s, but 25 in my head is still a baby. I think back to what I was like at 25, and I didn't know shit. I was lost and confused as fuck at that age. At that age, I felt like I was just beginning to question who I was and what I wanted. I was also going through a crazy amount of mental health problems at that time, and I would like to describe it as a quarter-life crisis. Like, it was a very, very confusing time in my life. And at that point, if you told me I needed to throw a baby into the mix, I probably wouldn't have survived. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm so excited to try this About Face liquid eyeshadow. Like, it's a chrome eyeshadow, and look how pretty it is. Anyways, back to what I was saying. There is no freaking way I would have survived, and I honestly don't even know how my parents did it, because they were young and moved to a completely different country with like barely any resources. My mom didn't really know the language. They had nothing to their name. And now they're basically throwing a baby into the mix. Like that just seems so wild to me. And when I was younger, I wasn't able to empathize with all that. But as I got older, it really dawned on me how hard it must have been to raise children in that type of environment when you barely even know yourself or the country that you're living in, and then you're just trying to make ends meet. It's not like they were rich or anything. So you're trying to make ends meet and you're also trying to raise a kid. Like, what? Like, I can totally understand why it was so hard for them to meet our emotional needs. Like, they weren't even able to fulfill their own emotional needs. And I think, you know, that's the thing that a lot of people like to completely neglect when talking about having children is, are you capable of supporting their emotional needs? I think our generation is starting to ask those questions on top of like, hey, are we financially stable enough to have kids? We're also asking the big question of like, are we mentally stable to have kids? And I think that's very valid. And I hate the argument of, oh, no one's ever going to be prepared to have children. Like, you know, kids are their own ballpark. You'll learn along the way. I can respect that there will be a lot of things that are out of control when you do have kids. You might just need to go with the flow. You'll need to learn along the way. But there are things that I think you can prepare for or understand that you need to have in place before you have children. Like, for example, your finances. You should be financially stable before deciding to bring a kid into the world. Like, I don't think it's fair that if you're planning to have a children, like I'm talking best case scenario where you want to have kids and you're actively planning for it. Like, I'm not saying like a mistake happened or, you know, just some unfortunate events happened. I'm talking about like properly you're planning to have this child. Like, I don't think it's fair for the kid to come into a world where, you know, they can't even have their physical needs properly taken care of. Like, why would you want to put a child through that? I don't understand. And I feel the same way about mentally being prepared to have kids. And I don't mean in the sense of like, you should read all the parenting books and know how to act when your child is doing this, this, and that, and how to take care of them. I'm talking about being able to take care of yourself mentally, because that's the best thing you can do for a kid. So many parents go into having children preparing to take care of the kid, which obviously you should, but they don't put any measures in place to take care of themselves. And I think if you're going to have a kid, you need to know yourself well and you need to understand your emotions well enough that you can regulate yourselves, because kids are so chaotic. Obviously, they're growing and they just don't have rational thinking. Like, they're not capable of doing it because their brain isn't developed enough to do that. So you are their prefrontal cortex. You are basically their brain. You should have the skills to be able to help your kid navigate through the world, especially emotionally. And I feel like most parents don't have that, and it's not even a question they ask themselves before they go into having kids. I can understand why my parents' generation, like the boomers and stuff, didn't kind of question their abilities in that area, because mental health wasn't really a conversation that many people were having back then. But now mental health is such a big topic that you should be able to get access to resources or should be thinking about your mental health before, you know, adding children into the equation. I feel like I've done enough work on my mental health to honestly understand that maybe right now is not a good time for me to have kids, because I know I'm not capable of regulating my emotions well enough to bring kids into this equation. Like, I deal with PMDD and I don't want to bring kids into an environment where there's a lot of emotional dysregulation, because I grew up in an environment like that and I know how much it fucked me up. So why would I want to do that to an innocent child? And I think these are the type of honest conversations we need to have with ourselves before deciding to have kids. And I don't see enough people talking about that, and it honestly scares me. In this society, it feels like children are just something you're supposed to check off, like a life checklist. It's like, okay, get an education, get married, buy a house, and then have kids. Like, it's just something that you're supposed to do, and I don't agree with that. Like, not everyone should have kids, first of all, because we've clearly seen there's a lot of messed up parents in this world that obviously should have never had kids, that obviously regret having kids, and the children face a lot of trauma because of that. It's just a weird thing to have on a checklist because this is someone else's life in your hands forever. Like, you don't ever stop being a parent. Even if your kids are like 18 and they've graduated and they've moved out of the house or they're married or whatever, like, you're never gonna stop being a parent. I still call my mom about things at the age of 31, you know, like, she's never gonna stop being my mom. I still need her and want her. Like, kids are the most demanding job in the world. Parenting is the hardest job in the world, and you can't change my mind about that. And people may not agree with it's the hardest job in the world, but I think the parents that are actively trying to be good parents, I'm not saying like they're perfect, but they're actively trying to be good parents and being conscious parents, know that it's very hard to do, because children will bring up all your traumas and insecurities. They will test your patience. They will push you to your limits, and you need to be able to handle that. You know, you need to be able to know yourself well enough to understand how to cope in those situations. Because oftentimes what you see when parents aren't mentally prepared to have kids is that they end up taking it out on the kid and blaming the kid when the kid is just being a kid. You know what I mean? Like, they don't have the emotional maturity or ability to regulate themselves. That's your job as a parent to teach them that. Also, I think it's especially important for people like me who have pre-existing conditions. I have something called PMDD, to be discussing these things, because you need to know if you have the proper support system in place to bring a kid into this world. It's important for me to be able to provide the best life for my child, both mentally and physically. And if that's not a thought that you're having before having a kid, then like, what are you doing? And again, I'm talking about in like best case scenario where you're actually planning for it. And I think what's especially sad is that I see so many people have kids. Like, I watched this play out with my parents as well, is they sacrifice so much for their children. God bless them. I'm very grateful my parents did that. But also they sacrifice so much of themselves that they begin to lose themselves in their children. Like, their children become their life and they are not their own person anymore. There needs to be a balance of sacrifice and being able to take care of yourselves. And I think a lot of our parents weren't capable of doing that. And I think that's why they project so many of their own insecurities, their own traumas, and their own dreams onto their children, and get upset when their child doesn't turn out exactly how they imagined them to be. Like, it's sad. Another thing I think a lot of people don't take into consideration is the change in dynamics around child rearing. Like, back in the day, child rearing was a communal responsibility. It wasn't just the parents' responsibility. The whole community took care of kids. That's why you have phrases like "it takes a village." And now with things like the Industrial Revolution and the feminist movement, you know, child rearing is solely the responsible of the parents, and oftentimes solely the responsibility of the mother. And that is a huge responsibility to take on and can burn out anyone. And nobody talks about it. So it annoys me when people come into my comment section being like, oh, you're projecting your own insecurities. You know, you shouldn't be putting this out there because it'll negate people from having children. That is not what I'm trying to do here. I'm not trying to negate people from having kids. I'm not trying to make them feel like, you know, having kids is a bad thing. I'm just saying, think about what you're doing and put proper thought into it before bringing a life into this world. There is nothing else that compares to having kids. Like, you can't return a kid. Like I said before, I think a lot of people think that having a baby is just another thing to check off of a checklist. Like, they want a baby, but they don't want to raise a human. And I feel like when you really think about that, that's scary. So going back to what I was saying before, I wish my parents did think this way. I honestly wonder what kind of parents they would have been if they had. If they had a choice, would their child have been better off? If they had the choice, I wonder how far they would have gotten with their dreams. I wonder if they had kids, would there be less resentment against them? Would they be able to support them in a better way where they weren't emotionally neglecting them or abusing them? And again, I say like emotionally neglect and abuse in a way where I know my parents didn't purposely do it, but it was the way they were raised. And because they didn't have the ability to, you know, choose what they wanted and go through a path where they could work on their mental health before having kids. Unfortunately, they just passed on that generational trauma to us. And so, you know, if they had the choice, would they have gotten help for their mental health? Would they have been more mentally stable to, you know, be there emotionally for their children? If they did end up having kids, how much further along would that child have been in their life? Like, I had a lot of generational trauma I had to work through because my parents, you know, unknowingly passed it on to me. And that definitely set me back in life. Like, instead of me talking about these things on the internet, maybe I'd be accomplishing way bigger things. Again, I'm talking about these things not to scare anyone. It's more to have a deeper conversation about one of the most important decisions of your life. I hate seeing people go into parenting not realizing how much work it takes and being sold this fairy tale of like, this is what you're supposed to do and having kids is the most magical thing in the world, and then losing themselves in it. And as a consequence, it ends up affecting the child in a negative way. It's not fair to the parents, it's not fair to the child. And if these types of conversations make you feel uncomfortable, then you should ask yourself why. So many parents resent or regret their kids, and it's sad to watch. And that's not to say that they don't love them, it's just a different type of grieving process because they weren't allowed to make the choices that they wanted, or they felt pressured into making choices when they weren't ready for it. And it's time we change that way of living because now we know better. This lip combo is so fire. I might have to start wearing it more often. If you guys want to hear more about why I'm so indecisive on whether or not I want to have kids, let me know. I can make a whole video on that, but I will link 2 videos that I made for Instagram in the description below that kind of explains it. There are more reasons than that, but that just kind of touches on a few of my reasons. Anyways, this is the final look. I'm actually obsessed with how the whole thing turned out, and I'm going to be using this Grwm eyeshadow way more. I also have one in this like bluey purple color, so I can't wait to try this one out because this one, just chef's kiss, like so good. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this look and our little chit chat. If you have any topics you want me to cover in the next Get Ready With Me, let me know in the comments below or send me a DM on Instagram. You can also ask for advice if you want. And if you did like this video, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel. And also comment. Honestly, all the engagement I can get is really helpful to me. It pushes out my content to more people that might need to hear it. And it encourages me to make more of these videos. So I would really appreciate the support. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next Get Ready With Me. Bye!